Okay, so we spend a lot of time graphing sine graphs. Now we're going to graph some cosine graphs. So it's going to be the same process. You need your amplitude and period. You're going to divide your period into 4 parts, and you're going to still plot the 5 key points. The main difference is that cosine starts at an amplitude value or starts at a higher or lower value, hits the x-axis, goes to our minimum, hits the x-axis again, and back up. So in this case, we'll have 3 different maximum mins and only 2 zeros that we're graphing. But it's going to look like that shape. If it's negative, it's going to start down, 0, max, 0, down. Okay, so it's going to look something like that. That is the only difference, okay? Everything else is exactly the same. So let's jump right into the examples. Sketch 1 cycle. So, again, we start with what is our amplitude, what is our period. So my amplitude, when there's nothing there, we know it to be 1. My period is 2 pi divided by my b value, which in this case is 2. So that means my period is pi. So what's my next step? Divide the period into 4 equal parts. So pi over 4. Now, anytime we have a pi in it, we're going to leave it in terms of pi. So we're going to be working with fractions here. So every time I mark the axis, it's going to be adding another pi over 4 to whatever value I have. Okay, so if I'm sticking with the same 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to label that with pi over 4. So on the next 4th box, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to put the value pi over 4 plus another pi over 4. That's 2 pi over 4. So we would label this with its most reduced form, which is pi over 2, right? Because 2 divided by 4 reduces. So that's pi over 2. Now in the next 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to take that 2 pi over 4 and add another pi over 4 to it, right? Because that's my scale. So that will give me 3 pi over 4, and that does not reduce. And then we continue with our scale. 3 pi over 4 plus pi over 4 is equal to 4 pi over 4, bringing me right back to my period of pi. Okay? So that's how you label your axis. You're just dividing it into 4 and then just keep adding that value to get to the next. Okay? Now it is a cosine graph. All right, with an amplitude of 1, so we're going to label our axis. I'm actually going to give myself a little bit more space. So instead of doing 2 boxes equal to 1, I'm going to do 3 boxes equal to 1. Negative 1. Oops, sorry. 3 boxes. 1, 2, 3. Negative 1, 1, 2, 3, negative 2. Okay, so because it's a positive, I'm going to start in the positive area, and my amplitude is 1, so I'm going to start at 1. At the next mark, I'm hitting a 0. At the halfway mark, I'm hitting my minimum. At the next mark, another 0. And at the end, my maximum. So my graph is going to look something like that. Now notice, my graph is curved. And it should be because they have rounded edges. It's not connect the dots here. So that would be my full cosine graph for this function. Let's try 2 more. 1 more, actually. Only 1 more. Okay? Sketch 1 cycle of y equals negative 3 cosine of pi. So what is my amplitude? It's the positive of the number in front, which is 3. What's my period? Well, it is 2 pi divided by my b value, which in this case is an invisible 1. So my period is 2 pi. So what am I labeling my axis with? Well, I take my 2 pi and I divide it by 4 and I reduce it to its lowest terms. So that's pi over 2. Okay, so every 4 boxes, I'm going to add another pi over 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, pi over 2. 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be pi over 2 plus pi over 2. That's 2 pi over 2. That is a pi. Great. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take my 2 pi over 2 and add another pi over 2. Again, I'm taking the not reduced form so that I can add my fractions. That's 3 pi over 2. And last but not least, 3 pi over 2 plus pi over 2. gives me 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. Okay, so if you notice, those happen to be my quadrant angles. If you remember radians at all, those are my quadrant angles. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, what is my maximum and minimum? Will be 3. So let's do every 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. -1, -2. Oops. -3 and -4. And we label. So again, we're starting with a negative, so that means we're going to go down here to -3. That's where our starting point is. So we're going to go up to the 0. The halfway point will be our max. Back down to the 0. And then at our full cycle, we should be back down at our minimum and connect the values to get one full cosine curve.